allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. Benko, roll call, please.
Mrs. Britton? Here. Mr. Cook?
Here.
Mr. Deschaux?
Here.
Mr. DeLauder?
Here.
Mr. Eifert?
Here.
Mr. Emig?
Here.
Mrs. Herman? Here. Mrs. Maley? Here. Mr. Rawhauser?
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. We'll move right into our presentations tonight. We have a branding implementation presentation from Dr. Wiesling and Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, thank you for your vote of confidence in appointing me as the Director of Athletics and Student Activities on Tuesday evening. Thank you very much. With this role, I'm being asked to participate in ongoing branding conversations, and so I've put together some of the things that I know the athletic department has accomplished to date, as well as I've had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Perkins, and we met with Steve Rivera from Jostens, he and his corporation have been instrumental in the branding process. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the things that have taken place so far in conversations, some of the things that are associated with the high school construction project that we know of right now. And this is going to be an ongoing update as we are moving into different phases and as we identify, oh, this is somewhere where we can now focus and create a partnership and see where we can work on branding the district in a positive way. So I'm just filling time as I'm waiting for the, but that's okay.
Using someone else's computer, so.
That's all right. On the board agenda this evening, you are going to be asked to vote on and approve the style guide. And so it is an attachment, but I wanted to show it briefly. I was just going to highlight a few things because a lot of work, you want to airdrop it? Yeah. Airplay it. There we go. As Mr. Perkins has been presenting the last, you've done several presentations on it. A lot of behind-the-scenes work has gone into collecting information, collecting data, interest surveys, getting input and feedback on the components of the branding elements. And so all the behind-the-scenes work has already been done. Now it's ready to put it in play and get some buy-in. Am I controlling that now?
No.
Okay. All right.
We'll just go click.
All right, so moving on. So we are giving, this is a branding implementation. Just a few things I'm going to highlight. There's a lot there, but it's just more talking points. The first thing I just do, I want to highlight a little bit about what the official brand style guide is going to compose, the components in that are. And as we go through that on the next slide, I'm just going to ask Mrs. Benko to just go through, just to scan it. Like I said, you have it as an attachment. It is on the board agenda, but maybe even some of our audience members haven't even looked at it yet. So talking about the work behind the scenes has all resulted in this culminating document here of the branding guide. And so this is really going to be our document that we can use as a Dover community, Dover School District community, to drive all of our decision making, to make sure that we are truly working together to use the components that will identify us as the Dover Area School District. So this document has several components in it. And a lot of the information, as you're just going to see as it's scanning through, are some of those common things that we are going to be able to use and request from all of our organizations that we work with, and I'm speaking in terms of the athletic department right now as well, that's going to identify what Dover Area School District is by using the approved marks, approved backgrounds that we want to look for, being consistent with a lot of our logos and our apparel and uniforms. The approved colors, a lot of research has gone into finding what are the true colors of the district. And so our printers, our companies will have actually the lot numbers and the actual numbers of the colors to make sure that our products are displaying those things. Just different applications that we can use consistently in some of our communication vehicles to make sure that when people see this, they know what Dover Area School District is. I'll talk about later on some of the things that Justin's can work with us on to do a fan shop, a staff shop, some options of how some of our logos and our marks can be utilized on some of our school products, and things that we can use again to distinguish what Dover is. Some of the things that can be added to some of our facilities and our new construction in our environmental applications are really interesting to see, as well as out in our community, things that we can look to incorporate along the township and the borough that helps to tie in the district with our community, as you brought up, Mr. Delato, on Tuesday night, so some of those things. At this time, I wanted to highlight you because one of the big things that I'm going to be involved with is the athletic program is the cycle for the replacement of the uniform. So this is what is already in place, and you can see the years and the teams that are going to be getting their new uniforms replaced in this cycle. So of course, the 1920 year that we're in, those uniforms have been purchased because that's the cycle. So they weren't involved with this knowledge of moving forward with any of the branding or the logos. So, but for, with the exception though, for this year, Mr. App and Mrs. Harris in the athletic department were able to purchase the boys volleyball uniforms for this spring that do indicate and show one of our first marks. And even though it's this is just of course, the uniform itself, but the use of the mark is right here on the shorts, and it's one of our eagle marks. So it's the first attempt, I think there was a little disappointment when it came back that was all the larger that it was. But it is our first attempt to make sure that we're using the marks. And that's a term that I'm learning in this process, the mark. I would call it a logo, but it is a mark identified for our new branding. The other thing that they were able to get done would be our baseball cap. Now, even though the baseball uniform is not until next year's cycle, they replace the baseball caps every season. So they were able to get one of the D marks on here, as well as one of the eagle logos on the back here. Okay, so we're starting to push it out on some of our products. They also informed me that, and those links, Mrs. Becker, you don't have to show them. They were just also the pictures, as you saw, but I had the live here. They were also able to, in working with Mr. Perkins, Mr. App was able to approach some of our winter sports teams this year, and for their apparel sales. They were able to get their hands on some of the logos and get those to the local vendors that they were using to print their spirit wear, is another way to look at it, just what you want to purchase as a parent or a family member. They were using some of the branding for those winter purchases of apparel. So our goal is moving forward, once we get this style brand approved and we work towards the copyright and trademark, is that conversations I'm going to attempt to have with organizations in the community and the clubs, is how can we, when we're buying and looking to purchase these things, we want to make sure that we're using our emblems, our logos. Okay, this is a rendition of the new mascot uniform that is going to be in production. I was informed that they had 4 different vendors, and they went with a vendor out of Lancaster. This is the only thing I could come up with at this point that's giving us any indication of what the new mascot uniform is going to look like, but that's supposed to be available for this coming fall season. The one thing that I had a conversation with Mr. Nelson about is, as far as being part of the new high school construction, part of that construction is taking into effect that on the gymnasium floor, they are going to be utilizing some of our marks and our typography, making sure that the letters used to identify Dover and Eagles are going to be the ones that are approved by you in our style guide. And that's important. I'm amazed how complex this ends up being whenever you're looking at making sure to use the right font, the right colors, all kinds of things. So that's at least one thing that is included in the construction project. Moving forward, obviously, as I now getting into it and going to get tours of the building and become more involved with the facilities production. I'm gonna have some questions or some thoughts and comments on how we can take some of our other areas and use some of those environmental applications, some of our other things that you'll see in the style guide or that had been shown. Where in the building can we also identify what our district is, what we mean? So, but that's the only, gymnasium floor is the only thing right now that is part of the construction plan. So I might be coming to you with some updates on some things as I'm speaking to coaches, as I'm speaking to organizations, the administration. We might want to say, maybe we want something up here. We might want to look for something else.
Dave, was the entrance to the high school on the floor?
On the terrazzo floor.
On the terrazzo floor?
Yeah.
It's a big D, I think.
Yeah, it
Right.
is.
Awesome.
Yeah, and they already have the
Okay,
font
yeah.
and the typography for that.
Yeah.
Emails through today.
Yeah.
Along
Very
along
good.
that same line, I was gonna ask the same question. I know there's some discussion about a sign there somewhere.
Front.
You know,
Yep.
will there be something related to the branding on
Yes.
that as well?
Yes. Yeah, we put a stop to that because when we saw that, it looked a little different than what we
Yes, it
wanted.
did.
So, yeah, we caught that.
Awesome, good.
I'm trying to think, there was 4 things that we decided today. One was the basketball court, one was the terrazzo, one was the sign, what was the 4th? It had to do with the Eagle.
I don't remember off the top of my
I
head.
can't remember now, but it was 4 different.
There you have it. There's your update.
So the marks and everything and the font and all that, that'll be made available to the clubs, like to basketball,
That
lacrosse,
is
all the
correct.
clubs, so, okay,
That is
so they
correct.
can, if they choose to, they could use it.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, our goal will be, moving forward, is that we would like to, there's so many choices that we're trying to guide them in the direction that they
Right, it would be
pick
great
those.
if they would come on board.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Is there any chance that any of the clubs wouldn't be aware of where we're at in this process, that any decisions are being thought of, being made with uniforms that maybe, you know, they need to be brought up to speed on?
That's a good point.
Possibly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Potentially.
We haven't had conversations with clubs at this
'Cause
point.
I don't think,
Right.
I don't think the
No.
lacrosse club is planning on getting new
Bec-
uniforms right now, but who
Because
knows?
again, while we had to move fast on some of these things, we really didn't want to do too much without board approval. Because once we have board approval, it's like, this is what you will do. So that was important to us. So we will definitely bring them up to speed afterwards.
One of the,
Yeah, Jen, do you want to back up just one slide? There we go.
yeah. One of the things that was a result of a meeting that Mr. Perkins and I just had with Steve Rivera from Justin's is that we are looking to
Potentially.
Potentially. These are called brand canvases.
This is not ours.
It's not ours, okay? This is just a rendition, and it's a small rendition.
Very
because
small.
They can be made to be as large as 10 by 10 feet.
Or larger if we wanted to.
Yeah, okay. But what's nice about these, and what we're trying to do is figure out what we can do now, globally across the district, sooner rather than later, is to get some things out there using our branding, okay? And so this is a product that Mr. Rivera brought to us that would be available, and so we're asking him right now to spec out for 7 different of these for admin and the other 6 academic buildings that we have, to provide one of these to each building. And the proposal would be that this canvas has our new eagle, Dover Eagle on the center, and then each would be identified by the name of the building, okay? And what's nice about this, so that would be the first thing, and that would be the first canvas that's purchased. What's nice about this, and what Mr. Perkins is showing you, is these are removable. So you can, if you want to, if it's an organization or a special time of the year, special event, highlight images of current students. These are interchangeable, so you can create, and they will create for us new canvases that can be put on for a temporary basis or for long term.
Yeah, one of the examples they gave us, because I know we're in musical season right now, or very soon to musical season. One of the examples Steve used that some of the school districts do is they'll have one of these brand canvases outside of their auditorium where they'll put in whatever show it's going to be and advertise it that way on a brand canvas. Because obviously you have your initial investment if I remember the numbers right, and again, this is just a rough idea, but for a 10-foot by 10-foot, initial is like 1,000, roughly, 1,000 500, somewhere around in there. And then to get the canvas reprinted, again, 10 foot by 10 foot is about $800. So he said, a lot of schools will do that as an advertisement for different things, or as Dr. Wiesling said, for, let's say we put one of these in an elementary school. Well, maybe you say, welcome back to school, you have your welcome message, a fall message, you do a winter one, a spring one. It just gives you more flexibility than just going, hey, we're just gonna go paint the walls and put something up, or just a static image.
So that's a thought of, because we do have some budgeted money available right now, and we were trying to figure out how can we quickly get some of this out here in all of our buildings. So it's being proposed that we would purchase one of these brand canvases for each building, as well as a mascot mat. So a welcome mat, carpeted mat, that would be placed in front of each of our office reception areas or desks with our emblem on it as well. And there are so many different products available. It's amazing what we could do how we focus our initiatives. Okay, so that's what we're trying to think about doing right now. And so next steps, as I mentioned a little bit through the presentation, building those partnerships with our organizations and clubs. I plan to reach out to the building PTOs because almost all of our PTOs, and from my own experience at Live, do some kind of spirit wear. So we want to offer out the use of our colors and our emblems, and they can continue right now at this point to use the vendors and the apparel companies that they currently work with. Most of them will accept, and as long as you just provide them with the color lot number and things like that. Again, one of the environmental applications would have been the light pole banners, all right, and that's in your style brand guide. I know we have participation on a regular basis with township individuals and boroughs, so we want to see if maybe we can't partner with them to see what can we do along some of our streets around our building here, the new building in particular, and see how largely we can get with that to really, like you said, Chuck, I think you referenced maybe in Lancaster County, some towns, absolutely. You see a lot of places that just, when you drive into that area, you just feel it, right? That's what our goal is that this community and our district becomes that focal point, and that we just have that sense of pride, and this is what we are here at Dover School District. Mr. Rivera from Jostens approach in our conversation this week with Brad and me, doing a brand launch, like when we open up, for example, or have it all in place, a brand launch that's online that becomes a part of the school store products, as well as an online school fan shop and a staff fan shop that makes the purchase of our products very easy. It's online, shipped to home. School district gets a part of that, a certain percentage capped at a certain amount of the profits, but it's easy to manage. We just have to create it and get the access to our community members and our families, but a quick way to launch out our new branding by picking some products to sell. He was even talking about there are some incentives that are given out to certain groups to maybe have a discount or so much money off your first purchase, those kind of things. So we really want to work to figure out, and Jostens is fantastic, and his enthusiasm and the tools that they provide are just really nice. And so I plan on, as I get deeper into this role and I start identifying and hearing from people about the things that were ideas and stuff like that, I certainly look to investigate those and then come back with some updates as we are putting these things in place. Any questions?
Oh, great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our first public comment period. This is a 3-minute period for items on or off of tonight's agenda. So if you have anything you would like to comment on, please come to the microphones and state your name and address for the record. Okay, board president's communication. We did not have an executive session tonight, so we'll move straight into our consent agenda. As they mentioned, we do have the voting on the brand style guide as well as the LIU service agreement. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve all of the items listed under this consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Questions or discussion? Mrs. Benko? Okay, and the motion carries. We'll move on to our committee reports tonight. So our first report is the Comprehensive Plan, Curriculum, Professional Development Committee. Mr. DeLauder, Mrs. Herman, and Mrs. Maley.
Okay, thank you. We met this evening, had a couple things on our agenda, not as much as we usually do, but first thing we talked about, we started out talking about the policies that Mrs. Cream had talked about briefly on Tuesday, and that was the policy 204 concerning attendance. Again, this policy looks at the compulsory attendance, 8 to 6 for beginner, moving from 8 to 6 for the beginner, and going from 17 to 18 for up in the secondary level. It also talks about our SURF passes, and as she had said earlier, we're going to drop that from 10 days down to 5 days for non-school sponsored educational tours or trips. And I did ask them, if this was a flexible pass, and the response was, if you get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, obviously we're not going to deny that student that opportunity to go on that. We will not be approving passes during the PSSA or Keystone testing windows. And then we are also going to strongly discourage families from being out the first and last 10 days of school. Second policy was the 215.1 acceleration policy, and this was a policy that PSBA had recommended that we removed. But again, looking at our past practices, let me go back here. The acceleration, the policy had stated that students receive high school credit for taking college courses as part of a dual enrollment. The problem was our practice over the last many years was that the students do not receive that high school credit for dual enrollment. And the concern was if we removed that policy, we'd really have no administrative guidance, if my understanding is correct on that. So their recommendation is to leave that policy in place. Next thing we talked about, Jess Snyder, our former math coach, came in and just gave us a brief update on the spring math results. If you remember, we approved last year a pilot program for our second grade students to use this spring math program. The results so far are very promising. All elementary schools have shown substantial growth from the fall to the winter on basic addition and subtraction facts, and I think 26%, I think it was our average overall district improvement on that. And again, that's just with the first part of our school year on this. And so we are looking to expand that program next year to include grade 1. There was some discussion on where does the district see that program going, and at this point, because of the costs involved, looking at maybe just keeping it at the primary level, so that K-2 level, really concentrating on getting the basic math facts down, and hoping that that's going to give us those students a solid foundation for improvement later on in the upper years. Next, we talked about she gave us a curriculum plan update, Dr. Maloney, that is. They're making great progress, but they need to, unfortunately, to her, she doesn't want to, but she feels she needs to extend the plan into the 2020-2021 school year. And they will write the remaining high school electives and the CTE courses in 2021-2022, and that will be the related health, phys ed, music, art, media. Again, just she had put up her spreadsheet with all our classes that we teach in the district, and I gotta say, I know we had a lot, but when you look at that list and how she has that laid out, there's a lot of classes that they're writing curriculum for. So I commend all the staff and the administration that's been working on this. Just a fantastic job, in my opinion. And then you're going ahead and bring up a curriculum for approval And we're going to be looking to approve Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2, AP American History, AP Statistics, Chemistry 1, Honors Chemistry 1, and Physics. So look for that in the upcoming months. Final thing we talked about this evening was our federal programs. And again, I just touched on that a little bit at the last month of meeting on this. In case you're not aware, we receive a total of $727,607 from the federal government for our federal money. And that's divided up in between 4 different programs. We have our Title I funds, which we receive $572,059. Majority of those funds are spent on our staff who work directly with students, and those staff that are using that money on are 6 reading specialists at our elementary schools, 4 reading aides, a math specialist at the intermediate school. We also put a small amount of money back for our homeless students, and we use those in a variety of ways to support those students' needs. And then we also have 1% that's required to be set aside for parents and family engagement. Our Title II funds are supporting the effective instruction, and we receive $111,977 for that, and that goes to cover. We can use those for either class size reduction or professional development. We have decided, the district has decided that we're using that money for professional development, and there was a whole list of different professional development ideas that we've used that for. Title III funds is language instruction for English language learners. She has here discussed that if we receive less than $10,000 of those funds, of which we do, that money flows directly through the IU. And that's, again, be used for access training, services, and again, that's all given at no charge to us in the district. And then the final one is Title IV funds, and that is the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grants, of which we receive $43,571. And as part of the Title IV funds, as well as the Title II funds, we do need to talk with our non-public schools in our attendance area to see to identify any of our students who attend those, and then if they request that money, we have to provide services to those students if they meet the criteria with that. To date, Dr. Maloney said we have.
You're referring to Title I. The 2 and 4 is just they would be eligible for a share of the funds, which neither of them want to participate,
Right.
just the schools in our attendance center. So Pearl Tellman and Lighthouse Christian. So Title I is where we would provide services to any eligible students, if they're students that attend those schools.
I apologize for mixing those up. Okay. And again, so some of the things that we use that money for is our SAP through True North, which is our drug and violence prevention. We $8,500 there. Effective use of technology, so our blended learning program, which is our Schoology, $8,669. And then our well-rounded educational opportunities helps us to partially fund Mr. Mastrelli. If you remember him come in last week, he was here for our committee meeting, going with the great straw rockets. So again, he partially funds that program as well. And we do have an audit coming up on March 21st for that program. And the district feels confident that we should do fairly well, pretty well on that audit. And then we were going to do some grading practices discussion, but we decided to table that until next month. And that is all I have. Mrs. Herman? Okay. Any questions?
Any questions from anybody? Okay, we'll move on now to the Capital Project Steering Committee. Mr. Deschaux.
Okay, we have quite a few items. At the middle school, construction has started to demo in rooms 111 and 113. They're starting to cut out doorways to enter from the outside so they can start doing construction in there. The high school, the pool is completely removed. The building pad is installed for footers and have been installed, and block walls are starting to go up. I think year to date, our change orders were at what, 48,000? And we allotted 1 million, so we're doing well there. Our biggest talk today was about stadium upgrades. Current seating capacity for the home side is 2,240. Visitors is 856 for a total of 3,096. The talks are to make everything ADA, have accessible seatings for wheelchair. The big discussion was with the revised seating to give you the appropriate aisleways. You would lose about 204 seats. Unfortunately, we would have to do a lot of bathrooms. Women's total, we are short by 28. Women's sinks, we're short by 1. Men's toilets, we're short by 7. Men's sinks, we have 1 extra one, so that's not bad. Press box. The current square footage of the existing press box is 416 square feet. They did get a design scope of work from, that was from what, Crabtree? Yeah. Let's see, addition to the aisles for handrails for the home and visitor bleachers, widening the aisles and shortening of seats to accommodate handrails, incorporate accessible seating. Let's see, increase front aisle of home bleachers to accommodate seating down there, additional access ramps, expansion of the press box, expanding the seating to the original seating counts prior to incorporating accessible items and above. Let's see, the fee for everything, if we get Crabtree to do it, would be $23,500 to design it. And there is a rough estimate between $600,000 to $800,000 to do it. It would be nothing we would want to do right now, just because of all of the construction we're having. But if we would want to do it, it would be something we'd want to postpone for like a year or so. And that's what I have.
Just to add on the stadium upgrades, this started from conversations that we hear routinely from the public about how difficult it is to get up and down the steps in those bleachers. So, in one of the committee meetings, we asked for some research to be done on this and, what it would take to make this a little bit easier for people to get up and down and access this. So this is where this all started. The loss of seating capacity is both home and visitor side total. It's not all those seats are lost on the home side. This would be visitors as well. There was some discussion as well about the potential of regaining seating by having bleachers within the in the field area itself, so that the band could actually sit in there. They're in their own section, and then that opens up a whole section in the stadium again for spectators to come. I was actually, honestly, very pleasantly surprised at that estimated construction cost. I thought for sure we'd have 2 commas in a project of that magnitude. She thought it'd be $3.5 million. I asked her before the meeting. So when your budget lady over here says 3.5 and say 600,000, maybe that's pretty good. But as Dennis said, this is something to put on our radar. We don't want to move forward at this point just because we've got a lot going on here. On the middle school, if you wanted to drive by tonight and see some of the work that started there, don't, because you won't be able to see it unless you shine your headlights on it, according to Mr. Nelson. lesson because they hit a little bit of an electric line today in the demolition process, so there's no lights over there. But yeah, so that was it on that. Does anybody have any questions for the committee on that?
Two questions. Logistically, where would we get, how many bathrooms was it that we, or how many toilets would be needed? Like
28, they
28
were
rooms.
thinking about possibly, one idea would be putting it at the end, close to the tennis courts.
So you need to build a building, a
Mhm.
specific building with restrooms in it
Yeah.
to meet the need?
Yep.
Okay. The other question I would have would be, to be ADA compliant, does it require that special needs visitors would have to be able to go into the stands? Or could there be other areas that could be ADA compliant that would be maybe less costly, that would allow for, you know, to meet the requirement without doing all the extra work to put them up in the bleacher area?
By letter of the law for ADA, you have to give them the same accessible seating that you give everybody else. You can't have a separate section off to one side for ADA, or you can't have like bathrooms somewhere else. It has to be with everybody. You have to, it's sort of I like to use the word all-inclusive, where they get to sit the same places, they get to go to the restroom, the same areas, that kind of thing.
Any other questions from anybody? Okay, thank you. Facilities and safe and supportive schools, Mr. Emig and Mr. Rawhauser. Oh, you have something for us to see, some fancy pictures tonight.
Pictures, yeah. I'll make it quick.
The rock pictures are dwindling, I've noticed lately.
Yeah,
They're
not
getting
really-
covered up with the building.
There we go. Okay, so this is beginning of, we're kind of halfway between two slides there, the way it looks, but this is the beginning of, there you go, of demo and of the pool. And if you notice up top, there's a guy up there cutting. We did a critical separation of the building so that we didn't have any accidents where the wall pulled down by accident. So they were doing a critical separation here. And then as you see here, this is what it looked like from inside. So they, you know, cut it away from the wall so that, you know, we didn't do any damage we didn't want to do. Again, it's just another critical separation. We cut through every single wall like this by hand with a hammer and a chisel, or, you know, maybe a jackhammer, but we did it all by hand so we didn't wreck anything we didn't want to wreck. So this was day one after we got the critical separation done. This took about 3 hours to get to this point. We were having a meeting, and when I came out of the meeting, the building was gone. So this is from inside. I'm standing on the pool deck. So this was at about 4 hours into the demo. And this is from the opposite end. So you can see they're into it big time. What they did is they took everything down and then they separated everything. So the steel was separated from the copper was separated from the concrete, you know, it was all separated. They did it all with those machines. They were pulling out pieces of wire with those machines, those claws. This is from a roof, actually the new high school roof looking down. That is, although it looks really small, that's a diving tank. And this is their cleanup. As you can see, they're separating into piles. And this is all, it's all gone. So this is the building pad. And if you look up there to the top left of the screen, you'll notice there's a little section of blue wall and a little section of yellow wall with plywood across the doors. Those go into the shower rooms for the gymnasium. You can see a little better picture there. So. And they're pouring concrete. This was yesterday, putting footers in. And this was earlier today. They were bringing block in to start laying block in where they put the footers in. I was over this afternoon, and the block is out of the ground, so we're at ground level. We're making progress in the academic wing. This is the boys' bathroom. They're starting to put all the fixtures in. Everything's hooked up, ready to go. This is the girls' side. There's 4 large bathrooms in the academic wing for the students, and this is just one set, but they're all done. It's looking down one of the corridors. We don't have the ceiling tile in yet because We don't have water in the building, so we don't know if we have a pipe leak or sprinkler leak or something. So we want to wait till we put that towel until we make sure we don't have any leaks. This is a picture of loading dock looking out towards the multi-purpose field. And the wall to the left there is, it'll get brick on eventually, but it is enclosing the chillers and generator and transformer. So you won't be able to see it. This is a shot of the gym, or auditorium, I'm sorry. So they had that painted all up. And then this is, I'm standing on the running track around the top of the gym. So this is the track. It's huge. I didn't think it was going to be that big till I got up there, but it's big. And then it's just another view looking the other way from up there. And then this, although there's a wall that separates this is the cardio and weight room. And then I know I talked a lot about through the progress of construction, how they construct the walls, but this is just looking down on top of the wall. So you see on the outside we have our brick, then we have about an inch gap, then we have 2 inches of styrofoam, and then we have 8-inch cement block here in this picture. And you'll notice it kind of looks like it's all filled up because the top block on here it's going to support something. So what they do is they lay rebar in there and then they pour concrete in it to make it stronger. And then this one has a 4-inch block on the inside to help give some depth to the wall. And then moving on to the middle school, this was early last week, mid last week, I should say. We got the tree down. We're starting to dig, move dirt, got the concrete. A lot of the concrete's out here. And then this was earlier today. We have to move the storm drain in front of the school, so we were starting to do that. Actually, if you look just to the right of where that bucket's sitting in the bottom of the picture is the old storm drain. So we only had to move it about 6 feet, but 6 feet. So this is just another shot of a trench, and that's the last picture. Any questions?
Question about the walking track that you showed the picture of up there. Did we, I know in one of the buildings that we visited, they used that area for additional seating, bleachers.
Yes.
Is that at all in our plans?
Yes.
So we will be able to seat more people for, say, indoor graduation down the road if we decided to do that?
Yeah, and I wish I could tell you how many seats are up there, but I can't off the top of my head. I think it's like 3 something. But it's only on the one side of the gym. It's not on both sides. And if you walk through and you're downstairs, you always point it out because they say this side's wider because we have bleachers up there, and when the bleachers are collapsed, we still want the same width alleyway as the whole way around. But if they're on the one side, they're actually on the side towards North Salem of the gym. So we'll have bleachers on top. We'll have bleachers on both sides of the gym and the bottom, and we'll have bleachers on the one end of the gym. So we'll have a lot of seating, and it'll be air conditioned.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Okay, now we'll move on to facilities and safe and supportive schools. Mr. Emig and Mr. Rawhauser.
We only had one item tonight to discuss, and that was policy 222, tobacco and vaping products. Just to let you know, this policy was last updated May of 2014, and I asked Ms. Coltrider if she would give the board the information she gave us at the committee.
There are a couple of key changes to policy 222. The first being that the state has changed the tobacco law to now include all vaping products regardless of whether or not they contain nicotine. So what this means for us is we need to update our policy accordingly. We can look at changing the policy now, but then of course we're also going to have to look at kind of the snowball effect of what else we need to change. We'll have to update the athletic policy in accordance with that, because there's also a tobacco piece within the athletic and the extracurricular policies. We're also going to need to make some changes to our high school handbook and code of conduct as far as the disciplinary action associated with that. So if we can update the policy now, then we're looking at down the road changing. We're still weighing the pros and cons of whether we want to update our handbook kind of mid-year now and start enforcing some different disciplinary consequences now, or whether we're going to wait until the start of the next school year. So that's still in discussion of what we're going to do with that. In the new policy, there will be mention of medical marijuana. The current policy has no mention of medical marijuana at all, so that will be added. In the new policy, medical marijuana will not be permitted in schools or anywhere on school property. The high school is seeing an upswing in vaping products that contain THC or marijuana. That would continue to be covered under policy 227, which is controlled substances. So the new tobacco policy, while it covers vaping devices, would only cover the vaping devices that don't contain marijuana, because that would be a separate policy. Also, in addition, with any vaping device, regardless of its contents, whether it's nicotine or just a flavoring, means that we will be able to issue summary citations to any student or adult who is using a vaping product on school property. So that will be a piece of that will be changing. That's kind of big for us. Of course, we will need to look at how we're going to be communicating to students and to the rest of the community of these changes, because right now there is no mention of vaping anywhere in the tobacco law. So this is a pretty big change that we're going to need to think about rolling this out, how we're going to be communicating that to the students in the community. We also discussed that we need some further discussion to determine how we are enforcing with students and with adults. I know that at some of our extracurricular events, sporting events, there are some adults who are using tobacco products or vaping products, and there's some inconsistency or confusion in how that is to be enforced. So we need to have some further discussion on that as this policy is changed. We also talked about that our primary message is one of education when it comes to whether it's tobacco or vaping products. I know that Kirsten has been working with a vaping cessation program, and we've had some other staff members trained on that, because at the end of the day, I think being able to issue citations and changing our policy is going to help a little bit with the use of tobacco and vaping products, but really I think it comes down to educating as far as the dangers and how unsafe it really is. So something for us to continue to look at. Any questions?
I would assume with the updates, you'd probably be looking at the signage around our buildings and that sort of thing with the public awareness of what would be included and what wouldn't be included with tobacco.
Right, because right now it just says tobacco free. So as far as the state is concerned, the tobacco law, there's not a separate vaping law. The vaping is just now covered under the tobacco law. But you're right, there might be some confusion of when you look at that, it says tobacco. A vaping product is not necessarily tobacco. So we'll need to figure out how we go about informing the public. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Colrider. So after the changes that have been announced tonight in the policy, the committee decided that now it's time to move this policy to the board for approval.
Okay. Any other questions or discussions?
Oh, and just once the policy, this will go into effect the next school year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Emig. We'll move on to Human and Fiscal Resources now. Mr. Cook and Mrs. Brinton.
Good evening, everyone. We talked this evening about a number of subjects. Ms. Spenko gave us an update on the very, very preliminary governor's budget and what it's looking like for school districts and for education funding in particular. Just to highlight a few things that she had mentioned. As of right now, again, very early in the process, basic education funding is proposing an increase of $100 million across the state. Special education fund, the Social Security portion of that also would be an additional $14 million. So basically for basic education funding, about $114 million spread across the districts in the state. Special education funding, Governor Wolf has proposed a $25 million increase for 2021. The transportation budget is flat right now, and unfortunately, as has been the case in the last few years, the rollout of the transportation subsidies has been kind of lagging behind, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to be changing. So they're kind of on behind on that, so that's hard to plan for. Safety and security grant, which has been in the news the last year or so. Last year it was funded at $60 million. He has proposed a decrease in that down to $15 million. I know that's been something that we've secured and pursued. So looks like that is not going to be as readily available moving into next year, according to the current budget plan. No additional Plan Con funds at this point are proposed in this budget. Several other items of discussion. Charter school reform, which is one of the things that's in the news a lot right now, is a hot button topic. That topic may turn out to be something that our legislators are geared more to talk in the short term about than maybe property tax reform or so on. So that may be something that may benefit us, but jury's still out yet on that. We don't really know for sure how that's going to affect us. Other things that are discussion points right now are proposed minimum teacher salary of $45,000. Our beginning salary is higher than that, but districts that aren't may have to bump up to that. Again, if you've been paying attention to any of the news, Governor Wolf is a proponent of increasing the minimum wage. Right now, he's looking at $12 an hour with the intent of trying to take it to $15 an hour. Don't know what the consensus is amongst our legislators, whether that's going to actually happen or not, but if it does, it could impact us somewhat as well. And following that, then I'm actually going to reverse our order. I wanted to highlight one of the things that's in the preliminary budget, which we're going to vote on here in a few minutes, was the addition of a psychologist to our district here. I think it's important to note that that is not an additional person and an additional funding amount that we're currently not paying, but in essence, we are outsourcing that money to the IU to provide that service at 2.5 2.4 roughly people. So our intent there is to try to bring one of those back next year, perhaps another one in the future year or two, and bring some of those services back, have that resource very readily available for us, have consistency of that resource back in our ranks here, and use that actually at a cost savings. So when you're thinking about the budget, that's not really an additional person. But you'll see in your agenda that there is an attachment with the job description. I would encourage you to take a look at that between now and next month. This will be on our budget or our agenda for March for approval. So take a look at that. Assuming everything's moving forward, it would be good to have that in place for our new person that would be hired. As far as you know, how readily those folks are available, they're not plentiful, so to speak, but we did have a discussion about, you know, what we would offer and what might attract someone to a district, and there's probably some interest from, you know, somebody working in a district as opposed to working somewhere like the IU where they may not know for sure where they're going to be. They might be one place one time, very quickly another place. So there's some value in, you know, the right person who wants to dive into the same setting and know what to expect. So although there's not a lot of people out there, our hope is that it will attract somebody that could come in and you know, help our social workers and, you know, be that hands-on person in the district. One of my questions in our meeting, which was addressed, we had a long conversation about it actually, was, you know, why is it that we're seeing this increased need? We've hired a social worker, we've hired another social worker, now we're talking about needing a psychologist, and where are we headed, you know, in the next few years? And I was amazed at the feedback that this is becoming a very, very important part of the educational process for whatever reasons, and there are many, that our students are becoming this is becoming a very needed resource for our students. This might be different than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or a generation ago. Maybe our community doesn't realize this, but today's students are really in need of social and emotional help as part of the learning process. So my question to Tracy was, where do you foresee we're going? You know, if we've hired 2 people in the last 3 years and now we're bringing somebody else back, we're going to bring somebody else back. It's like, how much more do you think we're going to need? And the response that we got from our committee was, you could have a social worker in every building, and it wouldn't be
Don't
too
look
many.
at Kirsten, just look at her face.
So you're doing an amazing job. I mean, no doubt about it. And I don't know where we would be without you. But the word is, and the reality is, we're only tipping the iceberg here compared to where we could be, where we might end up needing to be. So this is a step in helping get somebody who can do evaluations and do the testing on site here and provide some additional help that is sorely needed. So you know, that kind of gives you a little bit of a frame of reference why this is becoming something that we're talking about, in case you had any questions. So
Steve, you're saying the psychologist, if the one that we would hire, would have more duties or varied duties compared to the IU psychologists, what they provide? Or is it going to be the same duties?
I don't know if you'd want to necessarily talk about, you know, exactly.
At this point, the person we hire would have very similar duties, but one of the things we shared with the committee was a new duty that our psychologist took on this year was the yes, the threat assessment piece. And that is new. That is new. So when we have a student who makes a threat, we have a whole formal process that the psychologist takes them through to see if that person is in a position to carry that threat out. So that right there in and of itself is taking them away from some of the very much needed special education work they need to do. So right now, we will continue as is, but the hope is, as we, you know, kind of get a grip on other things, that, yeah, that psychologist can do some other things. Yeah.
Because primarily with the IU, I mean, they provide the testing for students.
Right,
I mean,
right. And that's still, we still have a lot of that.
Yes, and we still
Yeah,
absolutely
yes, we
need
still have a lot of that.
But then
Mhm.
I just didn't know if we were trying
Yeah.
to then, on top of that, task them with other things that would make it
Not,
impossible
not
for
right
them to do
away,
what they
but,
needed to do.
yeah.
Okay.
So following that discussion, kind of intertwined within that discussion was our discussion about the preliminary budget, which we're going to vote on here in a few minutes. And we talked kind of at length about what some of the things were that we were proposing in that preliminary budget. Again, understanding that tonight when we vote, if we approve that, it becomes public. At that point, it's not final. At that point, there can be changes that are made to it, but it basically starts the ball rolling, puts it on our website, makes it available for the public to review for 30 days, which is the requirement before we can finalize it. And our goal would be to come back next month then and finalize it and move forward. But we talked a little bit also about the tax implications. One of the things that we as a board have been asked is to consider whether or not, you know, the tax that was proposed as part of that budget is where we want to go with the budget when we approve it, or if any of the other parameters that Mrs. Benko had sent to us in the form of that survey, what our thoughts were on perhaps something a little bit different than what was proposed. So the range is from no tax increase, which would actually be a tax decrease, so to speak, but from what we had originally committed to, a revenue decrease, yeah. And you know, we had committed from 2 years ago, we had committed to a 0.27 mil increase for the next eight years, I believe it was, correct? About? Yeah, about 8 years, to phase in the millage for the new building projects and do that over a period of time so that it's not a major increase all at once. So from that standpoint, the 0.27 mils that are projected, or they're part of our preliminary budget, account for that part that we had originally committed to. Beyond that, we could raise the taxes up to 3.6%, which was the max that we can based on our Act 1 index. So that would be the other extreme. We're not, we can go anywhere in between. So we had some discussion there about what our thoughts were on that. I shared my thoughts in the committee, and I'll share that in public here, and I'll invite anyone else that wants to share your thoughts on it to make it public, for public knowledge, before we have, you know, the vote, if anybody cares or wants to share. From my perspective, I feel like, you know, we did commit to that 0.27 mils, which would equate to a 1.19% increase to help with that building project. That would equate to about a $33 average cost for average homeowner for the year. And that's something that we set out to do several years ago. I'm committed to that as well, and so I'm comfortable with that. Beyond that, my personal opinion is, you know, first and foremost, our administration and our leaders are working very hard to operate within our means, and have been doing so. So much, in fact, that, you know, between that and some of the things we've been blessed with over the last few years, the projected deficits have actually turned into surpluses. And so although we've had projected deficits for a number of years now, we actually haven't seen a deficit materialize. And so we're in a fairly good position with revenue kind of put back in case we need it, you know, those funds that are put back, and we haven't had to really tap into them like we thought we would. Now that's not to say that we won't have to in the future, but one of the things that I always try to do is to try to balance what our needs of our students are with what the needs of our community is, and taking that balance into consideration, I would be hard pressed to feel comfortable voting for an additional increase over what we've already committed to, unless we actually do see that, you know, those deficits do actually materialize. And until they do, I would have a hard time making the case that we should go higher than what the already committed to amount is. So that's my personal opinion, and I'll open the floor if anybody else wants to chime in or has a different thought process before we decide tonight what your thoughts are on it.
I agree with you. I mean, exactly what you said.
I agree. I just want, I just want to be cautious too. I mean, there was a time where we didn't raise taxes for 3 years, and I kind of wonder if that is one of the reasons why we're seeing a bigger deficit. And again, I'm not saying I'm supporting an additional increase. I go back and forth. I wrestle with the fact that, you know, I don't want to be in the position where down the road, you know, we don't, and I certainly understand the financial struggles of our families. But I worry that if, you know, we're not thinking things through the whole way, that we don't end up in a position where we're going to get down the road and have a huge deficit. You know, I guess it's more of a proactive versus reactive approach, in my opinion. And I'm still wrestling with it, and you know, I haven't completely made up my mind at this point, although I'm leaning towards, you know, we committed to the increase that, you know, what is it, 1 point?
It's 1.19% this year. It's 2.27 mils.
Right. But I just want to throw that caution that, you know, just need to keep in mind that, you know, I kind of equated it in the committee, like you pay down your mortgage, you pay a little extra each month, you kind of have that larger amount that you, at the end. I just don't want to get in a situation where we're pushing things off too far, that we all of a sudden end up in a position where we now have like a $5 or $7 million deficit.
So those were just my thoughts. And again, those are just purely thoughts. I'm not decided either way, just kind of playing devil's advocate and throwing some stuff out there.
Anybody else?
Jen, Steve brought up the deficit, comments and the surplus and that. Could you maybe explain to us why we ended up with surpluses when we projected these deficits? I mean, what caused the difference there in the swing? And is there stuff there that we know we can't count on going down the road here that, contributed to the surpluses in the past that we know aren't going to materialize?
So I go back a couple years whenever, we weren't getting our Plan Con funding. For a few years, it was not coming in, and that's our reimbursement for our construction projects. That alone is $4 million of our surplus that we were able to transfer over to capital projects fund. Another issue that we have is that we are unable to properly project our state subsidies and even our federal subsidies at this point whenever we are bringing our budget together. So, I mean, there's been years, and this year is probably one of them, that we saw probably $200,000 extra in state subsidies. However, as we move forward in the future, that money that Governor Wolf has put into place as the extra funding could go away. We have districts right now, and I was just with your county business managers the other day. We have districts right now who are probably projecting a funding decrease within the next couple years. So, you never know which way it can go. We could have a new administration come into the state and we could lose a lot of funding. But I would say the subsidy piece of our budget projections is the biggest factor in some of the surpluses that we have had in the past. As you know, a couple years ago, we started budgeting on a zero-based budgeting model where we take all of our expenditures and we go through our report line by line by line by line to really look and see and do analysis of what we think we're actually going to be spending. And again, I don't have a crystal ball. We can do our best projections. It doesn't always come out right. Costs of things go up, they go down. So, but again, I think the biggest portion of that is the surpluses. Another thing, or the revenues. Another problem is that we've been having trouble staffing. We haven't been at a full complement of support staff since I've started here, 5 years ago, and that's leading to some of our major problems. So, other employees are having to work overtime. We can't, we just can't get qualified staff in here. Does that explain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, one of the other factors too that we had talked about in committee is you don't know what the medical expenses are going to be from year to year. You can have a bad claims year, you can have a good claims year. That can make a big swing in, what that reserve fund looks like, Lincoln Benefits Trust. And I'm happy that, obviously nobody wants to have deficits. That wouldn't sit well on my home-based budget, to have a deficit there. You have to look at it. But there's so many variables that are out there that you can't predict, that you can't necessarily bank on. And if we didn't have any reserve funds in place, I'd probably be thinking much differently than what I am currently. But I'd like to put this in a very positive light. There's a lot of people working really, really hard in our district that are trying to operate within our means. And we're not eliminating programs. We're not, we're actually bringing teachers into the classroom that really need to be there. And I feel good about what our administration is doing sure, it'd be nice if we had more money, we could do even more. But again, looking at what we need, what are the most critical needs, and operating within our means, it's a team effort. It's everybody involved, and I think kudos to everybody who's part of that process, not only in the planning stages, but then in the implementation stages. And as it was mentioned in our committee meeting, you know, from a public's perspective, you got to look at what we're providing. You know, if this was all about taxes, nobody would want to ever see a tax increase. But our responsibility and my responsibility as a board member is to balance what we provide and do it for the sake of the kids and still take into consideration the needs of our community and our citizens of our community. And I'm hoping that I'm making the decisions that, you know, take that into consideration. That's always my goal. And so from that perspective, that's kind of where I've kind of landed. So I think it's important for the community to hear that from us.
One other thing that has contributed to the surpluses in the past year or two, we are seeing a higher collection rate on our real estate taxes, which is good. I'd say 3 or 4 years ago, when the economy wasn't doing that great yet, we were at a 94% collection rate. We're seeing more of an uptick to 95.5%, 96%. So that has contributed to some. We budgeted last year at 95.5%, the year before 95%, and we're continuing to see an uptake. So if something happens to the economy, which often does happen in an election year, a presidential election year, that we could see that come down also. Our EIT collections have been up from what we have budgeted based on the economy too. What is down is our delinquent EIT taxes and our delinquent real estate taxes, because those who are down, and you know they can't pay them. But luckily, we're seeing it on the front end. But again, if the economy slopes, we'll see a decrease.
So I think that's kind of in a nutshell what we had. Did I miss anything? Okay. So, thank you.
No, it's included. The 1.19 is included.
Anybody else have any other comments or questions or anything? Okay, we'll then entertain a motion to approve the 2020-2021 preliminary budget for public inspection as per the enclosure, which reflects the 1.19% increase that we had committed to.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussions?
So what then, does that boil down to the average taxpayer, $33? Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, Mrs. Benko? And the motion carries. Okay, thank you, everybody. At this point, we'll have any other comments or observations from our board members tonight. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our last public comment period. It's a 2-minute period for items on or off of the agenda. And again, if you have anything you'd like to comment on, please come to the microphones and state your name and address for the record. Okay, future meetings. Tuesday, March 17th is our regular board meeting at 7 p.m. And then Thursday, March 19th, we have our board committee meetings at 6 and our board planning meeting at 7. So if there is no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.